My name is Julia, and I'm 35 years old. As a single mother, my 12-year-old daughter Emma is my entire world. Everything I do is for her. But last month, while on a business trip to Chicago, I received a call that shattered my trust in my family forever. Emma was in tears, telling me that her Aunt Stephanie had kicked her out of my parents' house. When I called my mother for an explanation, her words cut deeper than any knife. Maybe you and Emma aren't needed here right now. Blood may be thicker than water, but when my own family put my child on the street, I learned that sometimes you have to be willing to cut ties to protect what matters most. If you're watching this, drop a comment, letting me know where you're from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to make difficult decisions to protect yourself or someone you love. Now, let me tell you how I went from being my family's financial savior to cutting them off completely. I grew up in a middle-class family in suburban Boston, the oldest of 2 daughters. My sister Stephanie is 3 years younger than me, and from as early as I can remember, there was always a sense of competition between us. Not from my side, I adored my little sister and wanted to protect her. But as we grew, it became increasingly clear that in our family dynamic, Stephanie was the golden child, while I was expected to be the responsible one. Our parents, Robert and Nancy, weren't terrible people. They provided for us, made sure we had good educations, and there were plenty of happy moments. But there was always an undercurrent of favoritism that became more pronounced as we got older. When Stephanie brought home B's, she was praised lavishly. When I brought home A's, it was expected. Of course, Julia did well, she always does, my mother would say, as if my achievements were somehow less worthy of celebration because they were consistent. This pattern continued through high school and into college. I worked part-time jobs to help pay for my education, while my parents covered Stephanie's expenses entirely. Your sister isn't as organized as you, my father would explain. She needs more support. I accepted this explanation because that's what good daughters do. They understand and accommodate their family's needs. My life took an unexpected turn when I was 23. I had just graduated with my marketing degree and was dating Mark, a charming guy I'd met during my senior year. When I discovered I was pregnant, Mark's charm quickly evaporated. He wasn't ready to be a father, he said. He had plans, ambitions that didn't include an unplanned child. 2 weeks after I told him about the pregnancy, he was gone. I still remember sitting in my parents' living room, hands trembling as I told them they were going to be grandparents. The disappointment in their eyes was unmistakable. "How could you be so careless, Julia?" my mother had asked. "You were always the sensible one." My father simply sat in silence, looking at the floor. Stephanie, who was home from college for the weekend, made a comment about how this would ruin my life. But to their credit, once the initial shock wore off, my parents did step up. They offered me a place to stay until I could get on my feet. My father helped me find a better job with his connections, and my mother accompanied me to doctor's appointments. When Emma was born, they fell in love with her instantly, as grandparents often do. Stephanie, however, always seemed to view my daughter as an inconvenience, a reminder of my mistake. The first few years as a single mother were brutal. I worked multiple jobs a day, position at a small marketing firm, and weekend shifts at a local restaurant. My parents helped with childcare when they could, but they both worked full-time, so I also paid for daycare. Every penny went toward providing for Emma and saving for our future. I lived on minimal sleep and maximum coffee, determined to create a good life for my daughter, despite the circumstances. Slowly but surely, I built a career in marketing. I had a natural talent for understanding consumer behavior and creating campaigns that resonated with people. By the time Emma was 5, I had secured a position at a respected agency with a salary that allowed us to move into our own apartment. By the time she was 8, I had been promoted twice and could afford a small house in a good school district. As my career flourished, Stephanie's floundered. She bounced from job to job, never staying anywhere longer than a year. She tried her hand at teaching, then sales, then restaurant management, but nothing seemed to stick. Her personal life followed a similar pattern, a series of relationships that began with intense passion and ended with dramatic breakups. Meanwhile, our parents were aging. Dad was diagnosed with a heart condition that required expensive medication. Mom developed arthritis that made it difficult for her to continue her work as a dental hygienist. Their medical bills started piling up, and their mortgage payments became a struggle. Without discussing it with Stephanie, I stepped in. I started paying their mortgage and covering their medical expenses not covered by insurance. It was a significant financial burden, but they were my parents. How could I not help Stephanie at 32, moved back in with our parents after her latest relationship imploded? She was between jobs again, claiming she needed time to find herself. She didn't contribute to the household expenses. How could she with no income? But she didn't seem to be in any hurry to find employment either. Instead, she spent her days watching television, scrolling through social media, and occasionally going out with friends who apparently had no day jobs either. I tried not to resent her. I really did. But it was hard not to feel a twinge of bitterness when I was working 50-hour weeks, raising a daughter alone, and financially supporting 3 adults, while Stephanie lived rent-free with no responsibilities. The few times I gently suggested she might want to look for work, I was met with defensiveness and accusations that I was judging her journey. Despite the complicated adult dynamics, Emma had a wonderful relationship with her grandparents. They doted on her, their only grandchild. Dad taught her to play chess and took her fishing at the local pond. Mom baked cookies with her and taught her to knit. Emma looked forward to her weekends with them, and I was grateful for the bond they shared. What I didn't realize was how much Stephanie resented that bond. According to my mother, Stephanie would become sullen and withdrawn when Emma visited, complaining that everyone paid more attention to Julia's kid than to her. I tried to be understanding. It couldn't be easy for her to live with her parents at her age, watching them shower affection on her niece while her own life felt stalled. But understanding someone's pain doesn't mean you should allow them to hurt the people you love. I just never imagined she would take her resentment out on a 12-year-old child. The business trip to Chicago came at a crucial time in my career. Our agency had landed a major client, a nationwide retail chain, looking to rebrand, and I was being considered to lead the project. If successful, it would mean a significant promotion and salary increase enough that I could start a college fund for Emma and maybe even help my parents move into a smaller, more manageable home. The trip was scheduled to last 5 days from Monday to Friday. It wasn't the first time I'd traveled for work, but it was the longest I'd been away from Emma since she was born. Normally, I would arrange for her to stay with my closest friend Diane, who had a daughter the same age, but Diane was dealing with a family emergency of her own. Her mother had fallen and broken her hip, so that wasn't an option this time. "Emma can stay with us," my mother offered when I called to explain my dilemma. "You know she loves spending time here, and it's summer vacation, so we don't have to worry about school drop-offs." It seemed like the perfect solution. Emma adored her grandparents, and their house had a spare bedroom that was practically hers, already decorated with her artwork and filled with books and toys she'd left there over the years. The only hesitation I had was Stephanie's presence, but I reasoned that my parents would be there to supervise, and surely my sister could behave herself for 5 days. The weekend before my trip, Emma and I drove to my parents' house to drop off her things and go over the arrangements. "Now remember, Emma needs her asthma inhaler before bed every night," I explained to my mother as we stood in the kitchen. "It's the preventative one, not the rescue inhaler, though I've packed that too, just in case." "Julia, I've watched Emma overnight before," my mother replied with a hint of impatience. "We'll be fine." "I know, Mom. I'm just nervous about being so far away if something happens." My father placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Nothing's going to happen, sweetheart. Emma will be safe with us. You focus on wowing those clients in Chicago." Emma was in the living room, showing her grandfather a new card game she'd learned when Stephanie came downstairs. She was still in pajamas at noon, her hair uncombed. "Oh, you're here," she said, barely glancing at me before opening the refrigerator. "How long is the kid staying again? 5 days?" I answered, trying to keep my tone light. "I'll be back Friday evening to pick her up." Stephanie grabbed a yogurt and shrugged. "Whatever. Just tell her to stay out of my room and not touch my stuff." "Emma knows to respect people's privacy," I said, feeling defensive. "She won't bother you." My mother jumped in, clearly trying to diffuse the tension. "Stephanie, maybe you could take Emma to that new ice cream place downtown one afternoon. I'm sure she'd love that." Stephanie rolled her eyes. "I have plans this week, Mom." "What plans?" I couldn't help asking. "Job interviews." The words came out more sarcastically than I intended. "Not that it's any of your business," Stephanie snapped, "but I'm exploring some entrepreneurial opportunities." My mother shot me a warning look and I bit my tongue. This wasn't the time to get into an argument with my sister. The important thing was making sure Emma would be comfortable and cared for during my absence. The rest of the afternoon was spent going over Emma's schedule preferences and needs. I'd prepared detailed notes about everything from her favorite breakfast cereal to the phone numbers of her friends, in case she wanted a playdate. My mother listened patiently, my father nodded along, and Stephanie disappeared back upstairs. When it was time for me to leave, Emma hugged me tightly. "I'll miss you, Mom, but I'll be okay. Grandpa's going to teach me how to play poker." I raised an eyebrow at my father, who had the grace to look sheepish. "With chips, not money," he clarified. I hugged Emma again, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Be good for Grandma and Grandpa, okay? And call me every night before bed." "I will. Good luck with your big meetings." The first few days of my trip went smoothly. I called Emma each morning before my meetings began and each evening before she went to bed. She sounded happy telling me about the cookies she'd baked with my mother and how she'd beaten my father at poker. "He says I have a natural poker face, Mom." She mentioned that Stephanie was kind of grumpy, but didn't elaborate and I didn't press. Siblings bicker. It's normal. I assumed my parents would intervene if things got out of hand. My meetings in Chicago were going exceptionally well. The clients responded enthusiastically to my ideas for their rebranding campaign, and my boss was clearly impressed with my presentations. By Thursday afternoon, it was all but confirmed the promotion would be mine. My boss took me and the team out for a celebratory dinner at an upscale steakhouse on Michigan Avenue. I was midway through my filet mignon when my phone rang. Seeing Emma's name on the screen, I excused myself from the table to answer. "Hey, sweetie, everything okay?" The sound of my daughter's sobs turned my blood to ice. "Mom." Emma's voice was trembling, barely audible through her tears. "Can you come get me?" I stepped further away from the restaurant noise, my heart pounding. "Emma, what's wrong? Where are you?" "I'm at Lily's house," she managed between sobs. "Aunt Stephanie kicked me out." "She what?" I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. "What do you mean, kicked you out? Put Grandma or Grandpa on the phone." "They're not here," Emma hiccuped. "I'm at Lily's. Mrs. Parker picked me up." I pressed my fingers against my temple, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. "Slow down, sweetie. Tell me exactly what happened." Emma took a shuddering breath. "I was watching a show in the living room after dinner. Aunt Stephanie came in and said she wanted to watch something else. I told her I only had 20 minutes left in my episode and she got really mad." "Mad how?" I asked, my voice tight. "She started yelling about how it was her house, not mine, and how I was always in the way. She said," Emma's voice cracked, "she said I was a burden just like you, and that Grandma and Grandpa only put up with us because they felt sorry for us." Each word was like a knife twisting in my chest. Where were Grandma and Grandpa when this was happening? Grandma was in the kitchen. She came in when Aunt Stephanie started yelling, but she just said we needed to work it out ourselves. Grandpa was in the garage. And then what happened? I prompted, already mentally calculating how quickly I could get a flight back to Boston. Aunt Stephanie kept getting angrier. She said I thought I was special because I got good grades, and everyone made a big deal about it, but really, I was just showing off. She said, Emma paused, sniffling. She said I wasn't really part of the family because my dad didn't even want me. White-hot rage flooded through me. How dare she? How dare Stephanie say such a cruel thing to a child, to my child? Then she told me to get out, Emma continued. She said she was sick of looking at me and that I should just leave. Grandma didn't say anything. She just went back to the kitchen. So I went upstairs and called Lily because she lives close by. Her mom said I could come over, and I put some clothes in my backpack and left. You walked to Lily's alone? I asked, horrified. It was only a few blocks, but it was dark outside. No, Mrs. Parker picked me up. I waited on the curb. The image of my daughter sitting on the curb with her backpack crying and waiting for someone to rescue her because her own family had thrown her out broke something inside me. You did the right thing calling Lily, I assured her, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm going to call Grandma right now and find out what's going on. Then I'm going to book a flight home. Can you put Mrs. Parker on the phone? There was a rustling sound, and then Lily's mother came on the line. Julia, it's Kate Parker. Kate, I can't thank you enough for helping Emma. I'm in Chicago on a business trip. Can she stay with you tonight? I'll get the first flight I can in the morning. Of course she can stay, Kate said firmly. And take your time, she's safe here. She can stay as long as needed. What happened, if you don't mind me asking? Emma was pretty upset when she called. I gave her a brief explanation, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. That's absolutely appalling, Kate said when I finished. What kind of person kicks out a 12-year-old child, and what kind of grandparents allow it? Don't worry about Emma tonight. Lily's thrilled to have her here, and I've set up the guest room for her. After thanking Kate profusely and speaking to Emma one more time to reassure her, I ended the call and immediately dialed my mother's number. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. My mother answered on the fourth ring. Julia, is everything okay? It's late. The casual tone of her voice, as if nothing had happened, sent a fresh wave of fury through me. No, Mom, everything is not okay. I just got a call from Emma, who is staying at her friend's house because Stephanie kicked her out and you did nothing to stop it. There was a long pause. Emma is being dramatic. She and Stephanie had a little disagreement about the television and Emma overreacted. A little disagreement? I repeated incredulously. Mom, Stephanie told my daughter she wasn't part of the family and to get out of the house. How is that a little disagreement? You know how girls can be, my mother said dismissively. They say things they don't mean when they're upset. Stephanie is going through a hard time right now. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My 12-year-old daughter is sitting in someone else's house right now because her aunt verbally abused her and kicked her out, and you're worried about Stephanie's feelings. Julia, you're blowing this out of proportion. Emma could have come to us if she was upset. Come to you, Mom. She said you were there. You heard what Stephanie was saying and you did nothing. You told them to work it out themselves. She's 12. My mother sighed heavily. I think everyone needs to calm down. Why don't you finish your trip and we'll sort this out when you get back? Emma can come back here tomorrow after school. Are you kidding me? I nearly shouted, not caring that I was standing on a public sidewalk. My daughter is not setting foot in that house again until Stephanie apologizes and you acknowledge that what happened was completely unacceptable. Don't be ridiculous, Julia. Where is Emma supposed to stay while you're gone? She's staying with her friend Lily. Their family has shown her more care in the last hour than her own grandparents did. I heard my father's voice in the background asking what was going on. My mother covered the receiver, but I could still hear her muffled explanation painting me as the unreasonable one. When she came back on the line, her voice had hardened. If that's how you want to be, fine. Maybe you and Emma aren't needed here right now. The words hit me like a physical blow. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then very quietly I said, I'll remember you said that, Mom. I'll remember that when Emma needed you, you chose Stephanie. And I'll be on the first flight home tomorrow. I hung up before she could respond and stood there on the busy Chicago street, trying to breathe through the panic and rage threatening to overwhelm me. My own mother had just suggested that her granddaughter and I weren't needed in the family. After everything I'd done for them, the bills I'd paid, the support I'd provided, this was how they repaid me. I called the airline and booked a 6 a.m. flight back to Boston, not caring about the change fee. Then I returned to the restaurant, apologized to my boss and colleagues, and explained that I had a family emergency and needed to leave immediately. To his credit, my boss was understanding, assuring me that the promotion was still mine, and to take whatever time I needed to handle the situation. As I rode in a taxi back to my hotel to pack, I made a decision. This would be the last time my family hurt Emma. And it would be the last time they took advantage of me. I landed in Boston at 8:30 the next morning, exhausted but running on adrenaline and fury. I took a cab directly to the Parker's house where Emma was still asleep, having stayed up late talking with Lily. Kate Parker greeted me with a hug and a strong cup of coffee. She's okay, Kate assured me as we sat in her kitchen. Upset, of course, but Lily kept her distracted with movies and ice cream. How are you holding up? I struggled to find words that didn't involve profanity. I'm in shock, honestly. I knew my sister could be selfish, but to take it out on Emma like that, and for my parents to allow it. Kate shook her head, her expression grim. I don't understand it either. Emma is such a sweet girl. Anyone would be lucky to have her as a niece or granddaughter. Thank you for taking her in, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I don't know what she would have done if you hadn't been there. That's what community is for, Kate said firmly. We look out for each other's children. I know you'd do the same for Lily. When Emma woke up and saw me, she ran into my arms, burying her face in my shoulder. I held her tightly, stroking her hair, and promising her that everything would be okay. After thanking the Parkers again and promising Lily that Emma would call her later, we headed home. The drive was quiet, Emma staring out the window while I tried to decide what to say. How do you explain to a child that the adults who are supposed to love and protect her had failed so completely? Once we were home, we sat together on the couch, Emma still in her pajamas hugging the stuffed penguin she'd had since she was a toddler. I'm sorry, Mom, she said suddenly, her voice small. Sorry? What on earth are you sorry for? For causing trouble. Maybe if I had just let Aunt Stephanie watch her show. No, I interrupted firmly. Listen to me, Emma. You did absolutely nothing wrong. Nothing. This isn't your fault. Adults are supposed to protect children, not hurt them with cruel words or kick them out of the house. What Aunt Stephanie did was wrong, and Grandma and Grandpa were wrong for not stopping her. Emma's eyes filled with tears. But why? Why would they do that? I thought they loved me. The question broke my heart. How could I answer it when I didn't understand myself? Sometimes people make bad choices, I said carefully. Sometimes they're so caught up in their own problems that they don't think about how their actions affect others. It doesn't mean they don't love you, but it does mean they made a serious mistake. Are you going to talk to them? Emma asked. Yes, I replied, my resolve hardening. Tomorrow. I want you to stay here with Mrs. Rodriguez from next door. This is a conversation I need to have with them alone. The next day was Saturday. I asked our elderly neighbor, a retired teacher who had often watched Emma after school, if she could spend a few hours with her. Then I drove to my parents' house, rehearsing what I would say the entire way. When I rang the doorbell, my father answered. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than usual. "Julia," he said with what seemed like genuine relief. "Come in. We need to talk about what happened." My mother and Stephanie were in the living room. Stephanie was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through her phone, while my mother sat in her usual armchair knitting. They both looked up when I entered, Stephanie with a scowl, my mother with a tight smile. "Julia, good, you're being reasonable now," my mother said, setting aside her knitting. "Emma can come back whenever you're ready. We've all agreed to put this little incident behind us." "Little incident," I repeated, the calm I'd been maintaining beginning to crack. "You call kicking a child out of your house a little incident?" "She wasn't kicked out," Stephanie interjected, not looking up from her phone. "She chose to leave because she couldn't handle being told no for once." I took a deep breath, counting to 10 in my head. "Stephanie, Emma told me exactly what happened. You told her she wasn't part of the family. You brought up her father abandoning her. You told her to get out. Those are your words, not hers." "She's exaggerating," Stephanie insisted. "She was being disrespectful, hogging the TV when I wanted to watch my show." "She had 20 minutes left in her program?" I exclaimed. "What kind of adult can't wait 20 minutes? "This is my house too," Stephanie snapped. "I shouldn't have to wait for your kid to finish her stupid show." "Actually, it's not your house," I pointed out. "It's Mom and Dad's house, and I'm the one who's been paying the mortgage for the past 3 years, so technically you're living under my roof." That got her attention. Stephanie sat up straight, her eyes narrowing. "What is that supposed to mean?" My father stepped in, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Let's all calm down. Julia, we understand you're upset. What Stephanie said to Emma was inappropriate. We've talked to her about it." "Have you?" I turned to my sister. "Are you sorry for what you said to Emma?" Stephanie rolled her eyes. "I'm sorry she's so sensitive." "That's not an apology," I said through gritted teeth. "And Dad, if you understood I was upset, why did Mom tell me last night that Emma and I weren't needed here? Why did no one call to check if Emma was safe after she left?" My mother sighed dramatically. "You're making this into such a production, Julia. You've always been so theatrical." "Theatrical?" I laughed incredulously. "My child was thrown out of your house and you think I'm being theatrical for being upset about it?" "No one threw her out," my mother insisted. "She chose to call her friend instead of talking to us." "Because you had already shown her that you wouldn't help," I was shouting now, unable to contain my anger any longer. "You heard what Stephanie was saying to her and you did nothing. You told them to work it out themselves." "What did you expect me to do?" my mother demanded. "Stephanie lives here. Emma was just visiting." And there it was, the truth laid bare. In my mother's eyes, Stephanie would always come first, even at the expense of her only grandchild's well-being. "I expected you to protect an innocent child," I said, my voice breaking. "I expected you to be the mother and grandmother I thought you were." My father looked pained. "Julia, please, we can fix this. Emma is always welcome here." "No, Dad, she's not," I interrupted. "Not when Stephanie is allowed to verbally abuse her. Not when Mom chooses Stephanie's comfort over Emma's safety." Stephanie scoffed. "Oh, please, she was never in danger. Stop being so dramatic." "Emotional safety matters too, Stephanie. But I wouldn't expect you to understand that since you've never had to worry about it. Mom and Dad have been protecting your feelings your entire life, even when it meant dismissing mine." My mother stood up, her face flushed with anger. "That is not true. We've always treated you both equally." "Really?" I challenged. "Then why am I the only one who has a job?" Why am I the only one paying your bills? Why does Stephanie get to live here rent-free while I work 50 hours a week, raise a child alone, and still have to support all of you?" My father looked uncomfortable. "We appreciate everything you do for us, Julia. You know that." "Do I? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you take my money and my help for granted while letting Stephanie treat me and my daughter like we're intruders." "You chose to help us," my mother pointed out. "We never asked you to pay our mortgage." "No, you just complained about possibly losing the house until I offered," I retorted. "And I did it because that's what family does, they help each other. But apparently that's a one-way street in this house." As the argument escalated, more painful truths emerged. I discovered that my parents had been giving Stephanie money from the funds I provided for their expenses, money for her business ideas that never materialized. I learned that my mother had been telling Stephanie she didn't need to look for work because Julia has it covered. I realized that the family dynamic I had accepted all my life, Stephanie as the favored child, me as the responsible one who would always pick up the slack, was never going to change unless I forced it to. "I've had enough," I said finally, my voice cold and clear. "I'm done being taken advantage of. I'm done watching my daughter be mistreated by the people who should love her most. This stops now." "What does that mean?" my father asked, looking worried. "It means I'm making some changes," I replied. "Starting with how I support this family financially." My mother's eyes widened. "Julia, be reasonable. You know we need your help with the mortgage and your father's medication." "And you know I needed you to protect my daughter," I countered. "We don't always get what we need, do we, Mom?" I turned to leave, but Stephanie's voice stopped me. "You're such a bitch, Julia. Always holding your money over everyone's heads, acting like you're better than us because you have a fancy job and a perfect kid." I looked at my sister, really looked at her. The pretty, charming girl I had adored as a child was now a bitter, entitled woman who had never faced a consequence in her life. And my parents, who I had respected and relied on, had enabled her behavior at every turn. "I'm not better than you, Stephanie," I said quietly. "I just made different choices, and now I'm making another one. I choose Emma. I choose to protect her even if that means stepping away from all of you." With that, I walked out, ignoring my mother's protests and my father's pleas to reconsider. In my car, I finally let the tears come, mourning the family I thought I had, the support system I had counted on. But through the grief, a sense of clarity emerged. For the first time in my life, I had put myself and my daughter first, and it felt like freedom. The next week was a blur of appointments and phone calls as I systematically separated my finances from my parents. I met with a financial advisor first, explaining the situation and asking for guidance on how to responsibly withdraw financial support without causing immediate hardship. "You've been paying their mortgage entirely?" he asked, reviewing the documents I'd brought. "Yes, for the past 3 years," I confirmed. "Plus about 60% of their medical expenses not covered by insurance." He whistled softly. "That's a significant financial burden. May I ask why you took this on?" I shrugged. "They're my parents. Dad's heart medication is expensive, and Mom had to reduce her hours because of her arthritis. When they mentioned they were struggling to make ends meet, offering to help seemed like the obvious solution." "And your sister, does she contribute?" "No," I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "Stephanie lives with them but doesn't pay rent or help with bills. She's been unemployed actually, I'm not sure how long it's been since her last job. Over a year at least." The financial advisor nodded thoughtfully. "I understand wanting to help your parents, but this arrangement seems unsustainable, and arguably it's not helping any of you in the long run. Your sister has no incentive to become financially independent, and your parents haven't had to adjust their lifestyle to match their reduced income." His words crystallized something I had felt but never articulated. My financial support, intended as a temporary lifeline, had become a crutch that enabled my family's dysfunction. With his help, I developed a plan. I would stop paying the mortgage entirely. My parents would need to either sell the house and downsize or find another solution. For the medical expenses, I would set up a limited monthly transfer to cover only my father's most critical medications. The amount would be less than a quarter of what I had been providing. Next, I consulted a family lawyer to understand if I had any legal obligations to my parents. She assured me that I did not. Adult children are not legally required to support their parents financially in Massachusetts, she explained. Some states have filial responsibility laws, but even in those states, they're rarely enforced. Your financial support has been voluntary, and you have every right to modify or end it. With the legal and financial aspects clarified, the hardest part remained implementing these changes and dealing with the fallout. I sent my parents a detailed email explaining my decision, the new arrangements for the limited medical support, and my conditions for resuming any kind of relationship. A sincere apology to Emma, acknowledgement of the pattern of favoritism, and Stephanie taking responsibility for her actions and words. I blocked Stephanie's number on my phone and Emma's, and I told my parents that for the time being, I would only communicate with them via email. It was a drastic step, but I needed to create a boundary that couldn't be easily crossed or manipulated. Emma, meanwhile, was struggling to process what had happened. Despite my assurances that she had done nothing wrong, she blamed herself for the family rift. "If I had just let Aunt Stephanie watch her show, none of this would have happened," she said one evening as I tucked her into bed. "Emma, listen to me," I said, sitting on the edge of her bed. "This isn't about a TV show. This is about how people treat each other. Aunt Stephanie said cruel, hurtful things to you that no adult should ever say to a child. And Grandma and Grandpa didn't protect you when they should have. That's not your fault. But now everyone's fighting because of me," she insisted, tears welling in her eyes. "No, sweetie. They're facing consequences because of their own actions. There's a difference." I stroked her hair gently. "Sometimes in life, we have to set boundaries with people, even people we love, if they're hurting us. It doesn't mean we stop loving them. It just means we're taking care of ourselves." To help Emma process her feelings, I arranged for her to see a therapist who specialized in family dynamics and childhood trauma. Dr. Lewis was warm and understanding, and Emma seemed comfortable with her from the first session. "Emma's experiencing a normal reaction to an abnormal situation," Dr. Lewis told me after their third meeting. "Being rejected by family members, especially trusted adults like grandparents, can shake a child's sense of security and self-worth. But Emma is resilient, and she has a strong foundation in her relationship with you. With support, she'll work through this." True to my expectations, my parents' response to my email was swift and desperate. My father called repeatedly until I blocked his number too, leaving voicemails that ranged from apologetic to bewildered. My mother sent emails alternating between guilt trips, "How could you do this to your own parents?" and minimizing the situation, "You're blowing this whole thing out of proportion." When the first mortgage payment was missed, the panic escalated. My mother's email was frantic. "The bank called about the mortgage. Your father is beside himself with worry. Please, Julia, we can work this out. Don't punish us like this." I replied calmly, "I'm not punishing you. I'm establishing boundaries. I've been clear about what needs to happen for our relationship to continue. The choice is yours." After the second missed payment, my father sent an email from his personal account separate from the joint emails with my mother. "Julia, please reconsider. We're facing foreclosure. Your mother won't admit it, but she's terrified. I know we made mistakes with Emma, and I'm truly sorry. What can I do to make this right?" It was the first genuine apology I'd received, but it was still just words. And it was only from my father, not my mother or Stephanie. I replied, "I appreciate your apology, Dad, but this isn't something that can be fixed with words alone. There needs to be real change in how this family functions." My mother's next email was less conciliatory. "We'll be on the streets because of you, Julia. Is that what you want? To see your parents homeless because of one misunderstanding with Emma?" My response was firm. "It wasn't a misunderstanding. You chose Stephanie over Emma's safety and well-being. And you won't be homeless. You can sell the house and buy or rent something more affordable with the equity. Many people live within their means without help from their children." The family drama spilled over into our extended family. My mother's sister called me horrified that I would abandon my parents in their time of need. My father's brother emailed to say he was disappointed in my lack of family loyalty. I explained the situation to each of them calmly and factually, and asked if they would be willing to take in my parents if they were truly facing homelessness. The conversations tended to end quickly after that question. Through it all, I remained resolute. The initial guilt I felt gave way to a sense of empowerment. For the first time in my life, I was prioritizing my daughter and myself over the expectations and demands of my family of origin. It was painful, yes, but also liberating. Emma, too, was healing. Her sessions with Dr. Lewis were helping her understand that adults sometimes make mistakes, and that she wasn't responsible for their behavior or the consequences they faced. She was developing a stronger sense of self-worth and learning about healthy boundaries lessons that would serve her well throughout her life. As the weeks turned into months, we created new traditions and routines. Sunday dinners once spent at my parents' house became special mother-daughter evenings with homemade pizzas and board games. Holiday plans previously centered around family gatherings at the big house were reimagined with friends who had become our chosen family. And through it all, I held firm to my conviction this pain was necessary for healing to begin. Real change would only come when my family faced the reality of their actions and the dysfunctional patterns that had persisted for decades. 3 months after the confrontation, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Julia." My father's voice was hesitant, as if he expected me to hang up immediately. "Please don't hang up. I'm calling from a friend's phone." "I'm listening." I said, neither warm nor cold. "I'd like to see you," he said. "Just me, to talk. I understand if you say no, but I'm asking for a chance to make things right." "Where's Mom?" I asked, suspicious of a potential ambush. "At her sister's. She doesn't know I'm calling you." There was a pause, and then he added, "Things have been difficult at home. Stephanie and your mother are constantly fighting now. It's like all the conflict that used to be directed at you has turned inward." Part of me felt a vindictive satisfaction at this news, but I pushed that feeling aside. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I didn't want my family to suffer. I just wanted them to recognize the harm they had caused and make genuine changes. "We got the foreclosure notice yesterday." My father continued, his voice breaking. 30 days to pay, or the bank takes the house. Stephanie hasn't contributed a dime, even though she found a job at the mall last month. Your mother is in denial, thinks something will work out at the last minute." He laughed bitterly. "I think she expected you to swoop in and save us again." "That's not happening," I said firmly. "I know," he replied quickly, "and I'm not asking for that. I miss my granddaughter. I miss you. I've had a lot of time to think about what happened, about the patterns in our family. I was wrong, Julia. We were all wrong. And I want to try to make amends if you'll let me." The sincerity in his voice touched something in me. My father had always been the more reasonable parent, though his tendency to defer to my mother's stronger personality had often left me feeling unsupported. Maybe this crisis had finally given him the push he needed to find his own voice. I'll meet you, I decided. Not at your house. Somewhere neutral. And just you, Dad. If Mom or Stephanie show up, I'm leaving immediately. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop halfway between our homes the following Saturday. I didn't tell Emma about the meeting. I didn't want to get her hopes up or cause her anxiety if things went poorly. When I arrived at the coffee shop, my father was already there, seated at a corner table with 2 cups in front of him. He looked older than I remembered, the stress of the past months etched into the lines of his face. But he smiled when he saw me, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I got you a latte," he said as I sat down. "2 pumps of vanilla, no foam. You still take it that way?" The fact that he remembered such a small detail about me was unexpectedly moving. "Yes, thanks." We sat in awkward silence for a moment, the weight of unsaid words hanging between us. Finally, my father spoke. "I owe you an apology, Julia. Not just for what happened with Emma, though that's a big part of it, but for years of not seeing you, really seeing you." He took a deep breath. "Your mother and we got into a pattern with you girls. Stephanie was always the squeaky wheel, always needed more attention, more help. And you were so capable, so independent. We leaned on that, took advantage of it. We expected you to be the strong one, the responsible one, and we never acknowledged how unfair that was." I nodded, throat tight with emotion. "It was unfair, Dad. It still is." "I know," he admitted. "And when you started helping us financially, we should have been more grateful. Instead, we just accepted it as if it was your duty. Meanwhile, we let Stephanie live rent-free, no responsibilities." He shook his head. "We failed both of you in different ways. We enabled Stephanie's worst tendencies, and we took you for granted." "And Emma," I prompted. "What about what happened with her?" My father's eyes filled with tears. "That's my deepest regret. I should have protected her. I heard the commotion, but I stayed in the garage because I didn't want to get involved in another argument between Stephanie and your mother. By the time I came in, Emma was gone, and they were fighting about what happened. I believed your mother when she said Emma had overreacted because it was easier than facing the truth. Which is that we let a child, our granddaughter, be hurt because we were too cowardly to stand up to Stephanie." He wiped his eyes with a napkin. "There's no excuse for that, Julia. None. And I don't blame you for cutting us off. I would have done the same in your position." His honesty was disarming. This wasn't the defensive father I'd expected, but a man who had been forced to face some hard truths about himself and his family. "What do you want from me, Dad?" I asked gently. "A second chance," he replied without hesitation. "Not for all of us. I know that's too much to ask right now. But for me, a chance to be the father and grandfather I should have been all along." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. "I wrote this for Emma. It's an apology. I'd like her to read it if you think it's appropriate. And I'd like to see her when she's ready. On your terms, of course." I took the envelope, touched by the gesture. "I'll read it first," I said. "And if I think it's okay, I'll give it to her. But I can't promise anything about seeing her. That will be her decision." "I understand," he nodded. "That's more than fair." We talked for nearly 2 hours. My father told me about the deteriorating situation at home, how my mother refused to consider selling the house, how Stephanie had become increasingly hostile, how he had started to question the family dynamics he had accepted for decades. "I've been looking at apartments," he admitted. "Small places I could afford on just my pension. Your mother doesn't know yet. She still thinks we'll find a way to keep the house, but I'm trying to be realistic." "What about Mom's arthritis?" I asked. "And your heart condition? How are you managing the medical expenses?" "Not well," he admitted. "I've been splitting my pills in half to make them last longer. Your mother's been skipping her physical therapy appointments to save money. Despite my resolve, this news troubled me. I didn't want my parents to suffer medically even if I couldn't continue supporting their unsustainable lifestyle. I can help with the medications, I offered. Not the mortgage, not the house, but I don't want you and Mom to go without necessary medical care. Relief flooded my father's face. That would make a huge difference, Julia. Thank you. As our meeting drew to a close, I found myself asking the question that had been lingering in my mind. What would it take, Dad, for us to have some kind of relationship again as a family? My father considered this carefully. From my perspective, it would take acknowledgement of the harm done, sincere apologies to both you and Emma, and real changes in behavior, not just promises. Stephanie would need to take responsibility for her actions. Your mother would need to recognize her role in enabling the dysfunction. And I would need to be a better advocate for what's right, not just what keeps the peace. It was a good answer, thoughtful and realistic. But I had one more condition. And Stephanie would need to move out, I added. I can't have Emma around her, not after what happened. Not unless there's profound change, and that would take time and evidence. My father nodded. I understand, and for what it's worth, I agree. The current living arrangement isn't healthy for anyone. We parted with a tentative hug, the first physical contact we'd had in months. I felt a mixture of emotions, hope that my father was truly changing sadness for the pain everyone was experiencing, and a lingering anger that it had taken such drastic measures to prompt this self-reflection. That evening, I read my father's letter to Emma. It was sincere and age-appropriate, acknowledging his failure to protect her and taking full responsibility without making excuses. He ended by saying he would understand if she wasn't ready to see him yet, but that he would wait until she was, whether that took weeks, months, or years. I called Emma into the living room and handed her the letter. This is from Grandpa, I explained. I've read it, and I think it's okay for you to read it too. But it's entirely up to you. Emma took the envelope hesitantly. Is he mad at me? No, sweetie, he's not mad at you at all. He's apologizing to you. She read the letter slowly, her expression thoughtful. When she finished, she looked up at me. Do you think he means it about being sorry? It was a complex question, one that required honesty. I think he does mean it right now, I said carefully. People can change when they realize they've made mistakes, but real change takes time and effort. We can forgive Grandpa for what happened, but that doesn't mean we forget or put ourselves in a position to be hurt again. Emma nodded, wise beyond her years. We can forgive, but still have boundaries, she said, using a phrase she'd clearly picked up from Dr. Lewis. Exactly. I smiled, proud of her emotional intelligence. So, how do you feel about seeing Grandpa sometime, not at their house, but maybe for lunch at a restaurant? I would be with you the whole time. Emma thought about it. I think that would be okay, but not Aunt Stephanie. Definitely not, I agreed. Just Grandpa for now. That night, I emailed my father to arrange a lunch meeting with Emma the following weekend. I also outlined my conditions for further family reconciliation, making it clear that while I was open to rebuilding a relationship with him, and possibly my mother Stephanie would need to demonstrate significant change before I would consider allowing her back into our lives. His response was immediate and grateful. The path forward would be difficult, I knew, but for the first time in months, it felt like there might be a path at all. The year that followed was one of gradual healing and transformation for everyone involved. My father became the unexpected catalyst for change within the family. After our initial meetings, he began standing up to my mother and Stephanie in ways he never had before. The house was sold not in foreclosure, but in a managed sale that allowed my parents to pay off the mortgage and have enough left for a small down payment on a modest 2-bedroom apartment. The transition was difficult for my mother, who had been attached to the house and the status it represented. But as my father later told me, facing the loss of her daughter and granddaughter had finally given her perspective on what really mattered. Stephanie moved out, finding a small studio apartment and maintaining her job at the mall. According to my father, she was still resentful, but the distance had actually improved her relationship with our parents. Without the daily friction of living together, they were able to interact without constant conflict. My mother's journey toward recognition and reconciliation was slower and more halting than my father's. Her first attempts at apologizing were riddled with qualifications and subtle blame-shifting. "I'm sorry if you felt hurt," rather than, "I'm sorry I hurt you." But over time, with my father's encouragement and the reality of the consequences of her actions, she began to genuinely reflect on her role in the family dynamics. 6 months after the initial incident, my mother sent me a letter, an actual handwritten letter, not an email. In it, she acknowledged for the first time how she had favored Stephanie and taken me for granted. She expressed remorse for not protecting Emma and for the hurtful words she had said on the phone that night. The letter wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Emma's first meeting with my mother 3 months after she had started seeing my father again was tense, but civil. We met at a neutral location, a park with a playground, where Emma could step away if she felt uncomfortable. My mother brought a small gift, a bracelet-making kit that showed she had paid attention to Emma's current interests. It was a thoughtful gesture that Emma appreciated, even as she maintained a cautious distance. "Grandma seems different," Emma observed on the drive home. "Less bossy." I laughed at her apt description. "I think losing the house and almost losing us made her rethink some things," I explained. "People can change when they realize what's truly important." As for Stephanie and me, reconciliation was a more distant prospect. We had exchanged a few terse emails primarily to coordinate holidays so we wouldn't accidentally overlap at our parents' apartment. She had sent a brief apology to Emma clearly at our father's insistence, but it lacked sincerity and self-awareness. Emma had shrugged it off, saying, "That's okay, Mom. I don't need Aunt Stephanie in my life if she doesn't want to be nice." Out of that wisdom from a now 13-year-old came my own healing. I realized that I had spent my entire life seeking approval and acceptance from my sister and mother, trying to prove my worth through achievement and sacrifice. But Emma was right. We didn't need people in our lives who couldn't treat us with basic kindness and respect, even if they were family. I continued to help with my parents' medical expenses, but on a much more limited basis than before. I set up automatic transfers for specific amounts designated for healthcare, only making it clear that this support was conditional on continued respect for the boundaries I had established. My father managed their finances now, ensuring that the money went where it was intended and that they lived within their means. Our family gatherings were smaller and less frequent, but in many ways more meaningful. We celebrated Emma's 13th birthday with a small dinner at a restaurant, just Emma, me, and my parents. There were no grand gestures or expensive gifts, but there was genuine conversation and laughter. It was the first time in years that I had felt truly seen and valued by my parents, not just as a source of financial support or childcare, but as a person. The most profound changes, though, were within Emma and me. Emma had learned early a lesson that many people don't grasp until much later in life, that setting boundaries is an act of self-care, not selfishness. She had become more confident, more discerning about her relationships, and more vocal about her needs and feelings. As for me, I had broken free from the role of family peacemaker and financial savior that had defined me for so long. I had learned to prioritize my daughter's well-being and my own without guilt. I had discovered that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to stop enabling harmful behaviors and instead insist on respectful treatment. Most importantly, I had realized that family isn't just about blood relations. It's about who shows up for you, who respects you, who makes you feel valued and safe. Sometimes that includes biological family, and sometimes it doesn't. Either way, we get to choose who we allow into our inner circle, and we have the right to expect kindness and respect from those we let in. Today, 1 year after that devastating phone call from Emma, our lives look very different. We have a smaller but healthier family circle. My parents visit twice a month for dinner, carefully planned events that Emma looks forward to. My father has become the grandfather he always had the potential to be, taking a genuine interest in Emma's activities and offering the kind of unconditional love and support that children need. My mother tries in her way, though old habits sometimes resurface. The difference now is that I address these moments directly, rather than swallowing my feelings to keep the peace. And to her credit, she listens and adjusts her behavior, a sign of growth I never thought possible. Stephanie remains on the periphery of our lives. We see each other at major holidays, exchange brief pleasantries, and then go our separate ways. Perhaps someday there will be a path to a closer relationship. But for now, this distant civility is what works for everyone. The financial strain of supporting my parents has eased, allowing me to focus on building security for Emma and myself. I've started a college fund for her and am even planning a vacation, just the two of us, to celebrate her upcoming 14th birthday. When I look back at the painful decision to stop paying my parents' bills, I recognize it as a turning point, not just in my relationship with my family, but in my relationship with myself. It was the moment I stopped being the dutiful daughter who sacrificed her own needs and started being the woman and mother who knew her worth and demanded respect. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who took you for granted? How did you find the strength to stand up for yourself or your children? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to prioritize their own well-being, even when family pressures them to do otherwise. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, true family respects your boundaries and celebrates your worth, whether they're related by blood or by choice.